It happens like almost every day. You're sitting in the office or maybe you're hanging out with a friend and they straighten a stack of papers or align their pens and they laugh and say, "Oh, I'm just so OCD about my desk."
Right. Yeah, we hear it all the time.
It's totally become this casual, everyday shorthand for just, being tidy or liking things organized.
Which is really a shame, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, let's unpack this because when you look at the clinical reality, it is a staggering contrast.
Oh, absolutely. Night and day.
We are doing a deep dive today into a really comprehensive medical and psychological breakdown of obsessive compulsive disorder. We're going to look at the symptoms, the underlying neurological causes, and the treatments.
And it's such an important topic for you to understand because the reality is that OCD affects about 2.3% of people globally at some point in their lives.
Wow, 2.3%. That's a lot of people.
It is. And for those people, it is not just some quirky preference for neatness. It's an exhausting and honestly often terrifying loop of intrusive thoughts and rituals.
And it typically consumes, what, more than an hour of their day? Every single day, right?
At least an hour, yes. Understanding OCD isn't just about memorizing diagnostic criteria. It is about understanding what happens when the brain's internal alarm system gets stuck in the on position.
Just constantly ringing.
Exactly. Unpacking this material today is really how we build crucial empathy for a condition that is so widely misunderstood and, quite frankly, trivialized in our everyday language.
Yeah, trivialized is the perfect word for it. So to really get our heads around this, we have to start at the core, like the anatomy of this loop.
Right. The disorder is essentially split into two distinct halves.
First, you have the obsessions. And to be clear, these are not just intense interests or hobbies.
No, not at all. They are persistent, unwanted, and highly stress-inducing thoughts or mental images or urges.
We're talking about like an intense fear of contamination or a desperate need for symmetry or even a crippling fear that you might accidentally harm someone you love.
Yeah, and those obsessions generate an incredible amount of anxiety, disgust, or just profound discomfort.
Which makes sense. If you think you're going to hurt someone, you'd be terrified.
Exactly. And that surge of negative emotion forces the second half of the disorder into play. Compulsions.
Right. The things you do to stop the feeling.
Yes. Compulsions are the repetitive actions or even mental acts that the person feels completely driven to perform. They do it to try and reduce that anxiety or to prevent some dreaded event from happening.
So we're talking about, excessive hand washing, checking locks over and over, counting to specific numbers, or just constantly asking friends for reassurance.
Yeah. Checking behaviors are huge.
But here is the cruel trick of the disorder, though. The compulsion provides this, temporary relief from the panic, but it actually reinforces the obsession over time.
It totally feeds it.
It's like having a really bad mosquito bite. In the moment when the anxiety is spiking, scratching that bite feels like the absolute only way to get relief. You have to do it.
Right. The urge is overwhelming.
But by scratching it, you're inflaming the area, you're damaging the skin, and ultimately, you are making the itch come back even stronger and worse than before.
That is a perfect analogy. You are feeding the cycle every single time you engage in the compulsion.
It sounds like a trap.
It is. And what makes this so incredibly painful for the individual is a clinical concept called insight.
Insight, right? Like how aware they are.
Exactly. The vast majority of adults with OCD have good or fair insight. They know their rituals are irrational.
They know it makes no sense.
Yes. They are fully aware that, say, tapping a door frame 3 times won't actually prevent a car crash. They just feel they have to act as though these ideas are realistic to fend off the sheer dread they are experiencing.
That sounds absolutely exhausting.
Yeah.
Like living with a brain that is forcing you to do things, make no logical sense.
It's agonizing for them.
But the sources noted that about 4% of people with OCD have what's called no insight.
Right, about 4%.
Where they are, completely convinced their obsessive beliefs are true, which borders on delusional and can sometimes look like a psychotic disorder.
Yes, the lines can get blurry in severe cases without insight.
But let me push back for a second, because I think a lot of people listening might be wondering, what is the actual line between OCD and just being a severe perfectionist?
Oh, that's a great question.
Like someone who has extremely rigid rules for how their life and their house should look. Where do we draw that line?
Well, what's fascinating here is the psychological distinction between two very specific terms, ego-dystonic and ego-syntonic.
Ego what?
Ego-dystonic. OCD is an ego-dystonic disorder.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
It means the intrusive thoughts and the compulsions are entirely inconsistent with the person's true self-concept. They go against who the person wants to be, which is exactly why they cause so much distress.
Ah, I get it. An ego-dystonic thought feels like an alien invader in your own mind.
Yeah.
You hate it. You don't want it there.
Perfectly said. Now compare that to obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, or OCPD, which is a separate condition entirely.
Right, OCPD.
OCPD is egosyntonic. People with OCPD believe that their rigid rules, their perfectionism, and their extreme need for control are correct and rational.
So they like being that way.
Exactly. They accept these traits as a core part of their self-image. They will readily explain to you why their way of doing things is the right way, and they might even derive a sense of pride or pleasure from it.
Oh, wow. So the person with OCD is basically a hostage to their own brain, while the person with OCPD thinks everyone else should just be following their rules.
That distinction is huge, yes.
Now that we understand that loop, the obsession, the anxiety, the compulsion, the temporary relief, and the reinforcement, we need to look at how this manifests in the real world.
Because it is rarely just about hand-washing or organizing books.
Right. The researchers identified 4 main symptom clusters to sort of categorize the disorder.
Yeah, so the first is the symmetry factor. This involves obsessions related to ordering, counting, and symmetry, paired with repeating compulsions.
Just that need for things to feel like just right.
Exactly, the just right feeling. Then the second is the cleaning factor, which is what most people picture. Obsessions about contamination and germs leading to compulsive washing.
Right, the classic portrayal.
Then the third is the hoarding factor, involving obsessions and compulsions specifically related to acquiring and saving items, often to the point of severe dysfunction.
Okay, then there's the fourth cluster called the forbidden thoughts factor. And here's where it gets really interesting and honestly, quite dark.
It is very dark.
This isn't about germs at all. This involves highly intrusive thoughts of a violent, religious, or sexual nature.
Yes, and people don't talk about this one as much.
There's a specific manifestation called scrupulosity. This is a pathological, crushing guilt or anxiety about moral or religious issues. The person is basically consumed by the fear that they are fundamentally evil, or that they are going to face divine retribution for some perceived sin.
These thoughts can be deeply disturbing for the patient. And there are also sexual obsessions. One manifestation is POCD, or pedophilia-themed OCD.
That sounds absolutely terrifying to deal with.
It is. A person's brain bombards them with the obsessive fear that they might be or might become a pedophile. Remember the concept of ego-dystonic thoughts we just talked about?
Right, the alien invader.
Yes. These intrusive images are the exact opposite of what the person actually values. They are abhorrent to them.
So the OCD creates this intense, agonizing doubt. The person experiences what looks like a crisis of sexual identity, accompanied by profound self-loathing, just because of a misfiring brain.
It's a terrifying invisible struggle.
And that constant doubting of your own fundamental nature that naturally bleeds over into doubting your basic reality. There is a phenomenon mentioned in the sources called memory distrust.
Oh, memory distrust is huge.
You constantly doubt your own perception and memory, even when there's no evidence you're actually forgetting things. You literally don't trust what you just saw or did.
And that intense self-doubt forces the person into checking compulsions. You check the stove 10 times, not because you forgot you turned it off, but because the OCD actively degrades your trust in your own memory of turning it off.
It gets even more hidden than that, though. The data says as many as 50 to 60% of cases might be characterized as primarily obsessional OCD.
Often called pure O.
Yeah, pure O. In these cases, the compulsions are almost entirely mental. There's no overt hand-washing or checking logs.
Not at all.
The person performs mental rituals like excessive rumination, constantly reviewing past events in their head to prove to themselves they aren't a bad person, or engaging in extreme mental avoidance.
And to the outside world, this person looks completely fine, while internally they are fighting an absolute war.
But if the symptoms can be entirely mental, measuring the severity has got to be so tough. How do doctors even measure something so subjective?
Well, it requires a specialized tool. The clinical gold standard is the Yale-Brown Obsessive-Compulsive Scale, or the YBOCS.
Low IBOCS, okay.
It goes beyond just asking what the symptoms are. It actually quantifies the suffering. It measures how much time the rituals take up, the level of distress they cause, how much control the person feels they have, and how much the symptoms interfere with daily functioning.
We really need to underline the level of that suffering because The tragic comorbidity associated with this disorder is staggering.
The statistics are heartbreaking.
Over 50% of people with OCD experience suicidal tendencies, and 15% attempt suicide.
Yeah, 15%.
The immense distress of these forbidden thoughts, the constant anxiety, and the frequent co-occurrence of major depressive disorder just make this an incredibly heavy burden.
It is a devastating reality for so many people.
So, with the severity of the symptoms so clearly established, the natural next question for anyone listening is why? Why does the human brain do this to itself?
The causes are multifactorial, meaning there is no single smoking gun. But we can definitely start with genetics.
Okay, let's talk genetics.
OCD is highly familial, estimated to be about 50% heritable.
Wow, 50%.
Yeah. A major genome-wide association study identified 30 significant genetic loci and 25 likely causal genes. They really highlighted specific genes like WDR6, DELOD3, and CTNND1.
So the genetic architecture is definitely there.
Very much so.
Right.
And it overlaps significantly with things like anxiety, depression, and Tourette syndrome.
The genetic blueprint sets the stage, sure, but what is actually happening physically inside the brain to create that feeling of impending doom? Like, how does a gene turn into an obsession?
We have to look at the brain's structural loops, specifically the corticostriato-thalamocortical circuit.
Okay, that is quite a mouthful.
It is. Think of this circuit like a gearbox that helps manage threat detection and action. The cortex detects a potential issue, say, a strange spot on your hand.
It's like the scout.
Right. It sends a signal to the striatum, which normally acts like a brake pedal, deciding if this threat is actually worth acting on. If it is, the signal goes to the thalamus, the action center, telling you to wash your hands.
Okay, so in a neurotypical brain, you wash your hands, the thalamus sends a signal back saying threat resolved, and the striatum hits the brakes.
Exactly. But in an OCD brain, that circuit is hyperactive. The striatum fails to apply the brakes.
Oh, no.
The thalamus gets continuously flooded with the threat signal. The gearbox gets jammed in the threat-detected position.
Just stuck on red alert.
Yes. And this structural hyperactivity is paired with a dysregulation of key neurotransmitters, the chemical messengers in the brain. Glutamate, which is a major excitatory neurotransmitter, essentially the brain's gas pedal, is running too high in these circuits.
Pushing things too fast.
Right. Meanwhile, serotonin, which helps regulate mood and emotional response, isn't functioning efficiently enough to help calm the system down.
So the hardware is jammed, and the chemical software is constantly hitting the gas pedal. That's a perfect storm.
It really is.
Okay, so if someone has these genes and these structural vulnerabilities, is it just a ticking time bomb? Or does something in the world actually flip the switch to trigger the disorder?
Environmental factors play a massive role. Severe childhood trauma, abuse, or neglect are significant risk factors. Major life stressors like bereavement or even the hormonal shifts of childbirth can trigger the onset.
I found this next part from the sources genuinely surprising. The clinical data shows that OCD can actually be drug-induced.
Yeah, that shocks a lot of people.
Exposure to certain toxins or drugs like methamphetamine or cocaine can induce obsessive-compulsive symptoms in people who have absolutely no history of the disorder.
Because of how they mess with the brain's chemistry.
Even certain prescription medications, specifically atypical antipsychotics like olanzapine, can sometimes trigger OZB symptoms in patients being treated for schizophrenia.
It just highlights how delicate that neurotransmitter balance really is. Altering dopamine or serotonin pathways with a substance can inadvertently jam that gearbox we just talked about.
And that delicate balance is really obvious when you look at the pediatric autoimmune connection. PANDAS.
Wow, yes, PANDAS.
Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections. A kid gets a common strep infection.
It's just normal strep throat.
Right. But instead of just a sore throat, their immune system gets confused and mounts an autoimmune response that mistakenly attacks the basal ganglia in their own brain.
It turns on itself.
And this leads to a sudden, almost overnight onset of severe OCD symptoms and entics. Literally overnight. They go to bed with a fever and wake up unable to stop washing their hands. It proves how profoundly neurological this is.
It is a stark reminder that this is a physical condition manifesting through behavioral symptoms.
Let me step back for a second, though, and ask you a foundational, almost philosophical question.
Sure, go for it.
If evolution optimizes for survival and weeds out traits that are harmful, why would evolution let a genetic vulnerability survive that causes you to wash your hands until they literally bleed?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, evolutionary psychologists have a very compelling theory here.
Okay.
They postulate that moderate versions of these compulsive behaviors were actually massive evolutionary advantages for early humans.
How so?
Think about our ancestors. Moderate, constant checking of the environment for enemies kept you alive. Checking the hearth to make sure the fire wasn't going to burn down your shelter kept you alive.
That makes sense.
Hoarding resources meant you survived a brutal winter. Hypervigilance about hygiene and contamination protected your tribe from disease before humanity even knew what a germ was.
So a little bit of anxiety and checking was essentially a superpower. The caveman who checked the bushes 3 times didn't get eaten by the tiger.
Exactly. In this view, OCD might just be the extreme statistical tale of these ancient, highly successful survival mechanisms. The genes that made our ancestors cautious and prepared are the exact same genes that, when turned up too high, result in clinical OCD.
That completely reframes the disorder for me. It is not a weakness. It's a survival instinct that has gone completely rogue.
A very good way to look at it.
But if OCD is this ancient evolutionary mechanism acting like a stuck car alarm, how do modern humans actually stop it? What does the research say actually breaks the loop?
Well, the good news is that we have highly effective treatments. The gold standard first-line psychological treatment is a specific type of cognitive behavioral therapy known as exposure and response prevention, or ERP.
Exposure and response prevention. How does that actually rewire that jammed gearbox?
Well, it requires immense courage from the patient. The person is gradually exposed to the very thing that triggers their obsession.
Like touching a doorknob they believe is contaminated or checking a lock just one single time?
Yes. But the critical part is they are instructed to prevent the response. They cannot perform the compulsion. They touch the doorknob and they sit there without washing their hands.
Oh, man. That sounds like absolute torture for someone whose brain is screaming at them that they're going to die if they don't wash.
It is incredibly difficult initially. The anxiety skyrockets because the brain is hitting that glutamate gas pedal hard.
Right.
But by sitting with that anxiety and not performing the ritual, they teach their brain a new reality. The brain learns that the anxiety will eventually subside on its own without the compulsion, and that the dreaded outcome didn't actually happen.
So over time, the OCD loop weakens.
Yes, they are essentially forcing the striatum to learn how to pump the brakes again.
They are rewiring the alarm system by proving to the brain that the alarm is fake.
Exactly.
I also want to talk about a newer form of cognitive therapy gaining traction specifically for OCD called inference-based therapy, or IBT. The sources mentioned this focuses on a concept called inferential confusion.
Inferential confusion is fascinating. It suggests that people with OCD put more emphasis on an imagined possibility than on what they can actually perceive with their physical senses.
Let's walk through what that actually feels like. Say I lock my front door. I turn the deadbolt. I physically see it turn and hear it click.
You have the physical sensory data.
Right. But I get down the street and my brain says, did I actually lock it? Maybe the bolt didn't slide all the way into the frame.
Under normal circumstances, you would recall the physical sensory experience of turning the key. You'd trust that memory and dismiss the thought.
Yeah.
But in inferential confusion, the imagined possibility, the vivid mental story of a burglar walking through an unlocked door, it feels more credible than the sensory memory of the metal clicking into place.
Wow.
You start trusting a hypothetical narrative over your own physical senses. You confuse the what if with the what is.
So what does this all mean for treatment? IBT sounds like teaching the patient to become a detective in their own mind. You have to learn to trust the actual physical evidence of the room, the visual fact that the deadbolt is turned, rather than the suspect whispering in your head that it might not be.
That is a brilliant analogy. IBT aims to reorient the client toward trusting their senses and relating to reality in a normal, non-effortful way, rather than getting lost in the labyrinth of imagined possibilities.
That's incredible.
And this raises an important question for all of us, honestly, even without an OCD diagnosis. How often do we confuse our own imagined anxieties with actual reality?
We probably all do it to some extent.
Definitely. How often do we let a terrifying what if override the concrete reality of what is actually happening in front of us?
That's a really powerful thought. But alongside these therapies, medication obviously plays a massive role in helping the brain calm down enough to even engage in that therapy, right?
Yeah. The first-line pharmacological treatments are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, like sertraline and fluoxetine.
Which tackle the serotonin issue.
Right. By keeping more serotonin active in the brain, it helps strengthen those braking mechanisms in the corticostriatothalamo-cortical circuit. The data clearly shows that combining ERP therapy with an SSRI often yields the best results, especially in moderate to severe cases.
But there are cases that are treatment resistant. What happens when therapy and SSRIs just aren't enough to unjam the gears?
Clinicians can turn to second-line medications like clomicramine or augmenting the SSRI with an atypical antipsychotic.
And if it's still resistant?
If it is still resistant, the FDA has approved transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, which uses targeted magnetic fields to stimulate nerve cells in the brain and try to reset those hyperactive circuits.
Magnets on the brain, basically.
Essentially, yes. And as an absolute last resort, for the most severe intractable cases, there are surgical options like deep brain stimulation, which involves implanting actual electrodes in specific brain areas, or even psychosurgery, involving highly targeted alterations to brain tissue.
Just the fact that brain surgery is on the table really emphasizes just how severe and biological this condition is.
It is a chronic condition, and completely symptom-free periods are uncommon. But with proper dedicated treatment, the reduction in symptoms is significant and the quality of life improves drastically for the vast majority of patients.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive. Thank you for joining us as we explored this material.
It was a pleasure.
If there's one thing to take away today for you listening, it is that OCD is not a quirky personality trait. It's not about being tidy or preferring your pens lined up.
From it.
It is a profound, often entirely hidden neurological battle. It involves extreme psychological distress, real genetic vulnerabilities, and survival instincts that have been hijacked. Knowing that changes how we talk about it, and it changes how we support the millions of people fighting that invisible loop every single day.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with a final thought, building on what we've discussed. If the evolutionary psychologists are right, if OCD traits stem from ancient survival mechanisms like hypervigilance, checking for danger, and hoarding resources to survive the winter, what happens when those ancient instincts meet our modern digital world?
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating collision.
Think about it. Could the infinite scroll, the constant compulsive checking of our notifications, the fear of missing an important alert, or the digital hoarding of thousands of emails and photos be exploiting the exact same neural pathways that used to keep us safe from predators?
Just hacking the system.
Are our devices hacking our ancient survival loops, keeping that striatum from ever pumping the brakes? It is something for you to mull over the next time you feel a sudden, inexplicable urge to compulsively check your phone.